Good morning, folks, and welcome to the September 15th Reimagining Public Safety Community Advisory Committee meeting. It is 8:01 a.m. and we're calling this meeting to order. We're still admitting some folks into the meeting, but I want to thank folks for being out today. We have a very engaging conversation this morning. We'll be talking a bit about the role of transportation and the physical environment and events in the relationship with law enforcement. So we're really excited to have John Ristow joining us today for a conversation that will be facilitated by Shiloh Ballard, who is the executive director of the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. So excited to have them both here. We're still admitting a few folks, but as we get started, we're gonna have a little introductory piece. But as we start each meeting, we want to acknowledge that as we host this meeting, where we are historically are the lands of the Muwekma Ohlone, and that and their peoples have been stewards of this land for many generations, and we need to commit ourselves to being respectful of our Indigenous brothers and sisters and their stewardship of this, and honor their legacy with the work that we're doing to help bring justice to our community. So we're going to send folks to some introductory breakouts this morning, and if you can indulge us, so it's a chance for us to get to know each other a little bit. But for the next, we'll spend the next 10 minutes doing a little breakout activity. And the question or prompt this morning is your name, affiliation, and how would you describe the physical environments where you feel safe? So we're just gonna have a chance to share with each other. So I'm gonna open the rooms and we will be back at 8:13. Let's see, there are a few more joining. So one second. All right, here we go. All right, we're opening the rooms now. We'll see you back in 9 minutes.
Program.
Welcome back, folks. All right. Welcome back, folks. For the next part of our agenda, we're going to talk about community member and organization impacted by public safety. So kick it back over to you, Shiloh.
Great, thanks, Poncho. And I am going to attempt to share my screen. I'm always super nervous about this because I am so not proficient with the technology. Can folks see my screen?
Yep, it's up.
I did it. Okay. All right. So my name is Shiloh, and I work for the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. For those of you who don't know, our mission is there on the screen. It's to create a better community, economy, and environment through the everyday use of the bicycle. And I come to this work as someone who was dependent on a bike and public transit for transportation. Like many of the folks out there, I couldn't afford a car. I wasn't one of those kids who got handed the keys when they turned 16. And as a result, I fell in love with biking, and now I ride my bike everywhere, even though I'm privileged and can now afford a car. That riding my bike makes me a very happy person, and I really hate getting in a car and driving. Unfortunately, it's not safe. Let me see if I can oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, so it is not safe to be riding a bike out on the streets. And actually, the roads are one of the most unsafe places to be for anyone, whether you're in a car, walking, driving, on a bike. So I put some statistics up there just to provide a little more context. 40,000 people die each year in car crashes nationwide, and this is everybody. And if you're a parent of a teenager, listen up, because up to the age of 25, traffic violence is the #1 cause of death for that age group. In San Jose, there are 18 crashes a day and 20 fatals or severes per month. And that means at least 20 people every month end up in a crash that is life-altering through death, or because they end up in a wheelchair or some other, thing that keeps them from living life as they used to. I myself have been hit by a car on my bike, and luckily I only ended up with a broken arm, a broken elbow, but my friend Ever Portiz wasn't so lucky, and Ever is pictured here with his wife. He was killed while riding a bike. He was a highly skilled rider, but nevertheless, even his skills on a bike couldn't protect him from dying on our streets. And that was here in San Jose. What happened was he rounded a corner on his bike. There was a fire truck coming around the other corner. They met head on. He slammed on his brakes, landed on his head, and died. The reason I'm telling you this is because working for the Bike Coalition, and there's a link down there if you wanted to click on it and watch the memorial ride that we did forever. The reason I'm telling you this is because working for the Bike Coalition, I represent a constituency that experiences close calls with a car every day. Speeding drivers, people on their cell phones, texting, you name it. The streets are not safe, and people die or end up in a wheelchair for life. And so here's the thing that relates to this task force. When people like me, and likely a lot of the folks on this call, think about how you make the streets more safe. If people are speeding, they're texting, what do you do? Well, we default to this very common notion, which is sensible for all of us who grew up in the society, that, well, clearly we need more police out on our streets giving tickets. If people are speeding, then we need police officers out there to make the streets more safe. Unfortunately, we know that increased policing through traffic enforcement means that for Black and Brown communities, the outcomes are very different. And we know that also thanks to the city, because a few years ago, they commissioned, I think it was the University of Texas, to do some analysis on their traffic stops. And they found that, yes, indeed, Black and Brown communities are disproportionately stopped in the context of traffic enforcement. And we also know, hold on here, I'm trying to change, yep. This is a slide of the city's, the police department's dashboard on use of force statistics. And so we know that traffic enforcement is the leading cause of use of force incidents. So I'm gonna try to wrap things up here, but I also wanted to highlight that one of the ways that SVBC as an organization became even more interested in this work is through Levi's Stadium. And this may sound odd, but you all may know that for events of a certain size at Levi's Stadium, a security perimeter is established around the facility. That perimeter, what ends up happening once that perimeter is established, it means that the San Tomas Aquino Creek Trail gets shut down. So members of the Bike Coalition started complaining to us because, you know, they'd be out for a ride with their family and then boom, the trail is shut down. And so we were like, okay, well, we're the Bike Coalition, let's look into this. And so we reached out to the powers that be and pushed and prodded with the police to help us understand why it had to be this way. And there just was no room for discussion. And, you know, at the time, honestly, I was like, okay, I get it that we at the Bike Coalition, we don't fully understand everything that's going on behind the scenes to make a huge event safe, especially in light of things like the Boston Marathon and other big events where something happens. So, and then also, we're not talking about the trail being closed every day or even every week. It was just a rare occurrence. So, we kind of moved on, but then not long after that, the city of San Jose shut down the Guadalupe Trail, and when there was an event at the SAP Arena. So we reached out to the council member and said, hey, can you help us understand why the trail was closed? And what is the policy that leads to trail closures? And the answer from the council member's office was that essentially the police have wide discretion to determine, first of all, if there is a safety issue, and then how that safety issue will be addressed. So if they think there's a safety issue, they can decide that the trail is going to be shut down. I want to acknowledge these are trivial complaints in the grand scheme of things from people who are riding their bikes, like, oh, the trail's closed, big whoop. And that's a fair point. But what I'm trying to highlight is that for us at the Bike Coalition, those experiences helped us realize that the police have a lot of power to make these determinations, and they do so with a very police-oriented mentality, which is understandable. That's what they're asked to do. But overall, these experiences made us wonder about that broad discretion that we're just handing over, and how we think about that, what the implications for that growing discretion going forward, and that it might be a time to just rethink that as we're doing here. So what I wanted to do today, what I wanted to frame up for today is a conversation about how we create safer streets in ways that do not heavily rely on the police. And so we've invited John Risto. He's the head of San Jose's Department of Transportation, to talk about how DOT looks at creating safer streets and how their work intersects with the police department. And ultimately, we're hoping that all of us walk away from this conversation better informed about the ways we can improve safety on our streets for all of us who use the streets without relying only on police and without tactics that in particular serve up Black and brown individuals to the criminal justice system. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen. I think I can figure out how to do that. There we go. And Poncho, did you want to introduce John further, or should we just hand it off to John? And thank you, John, for being here.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Go ahead, Shiloh.
Yeah. Or do you want me to start?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, John. This is John Risto on your screen. He's the head of DOT, and we've been working together.
Thanks, Shiloh and Poncho. Thanks for having me here. It's really great to actually get a chance to talk about street safety, because the Department of Transportation and the city is actually laser focused on that goal of trying to make our street system safer. And you mentioned it a little bit, Shiloh, that we've got a ways to go on that. Admittedly, I'm so sorry to hear about your friend. Unfortunately, we have that happening here on the street system, and that's why City Council, Mayor have made it our top priority, and it is the department's top priority to make the street system safer. With me today is Lily Limsau. She is my deputy director that is in charge of all of our street system safety activities. While the whole department is has a goal of safe streets, her division and department sections are actually set up to actually put that in place. So she's going to try to pull up a presentation that we have, and the presentation is going to talk about some of the things that the Department of Transportation and the city are doing to do exactly what Shiloh was talking about, which is to really focus in on what we can do as a department and working with the police department to make the street system safer. So you're going to see a couple of slides from what we have as a Vision Zero program. And just to give a little bit of background about what that is, this is a national effort where cities around the country actually commit to efforts to actually reduce fatalities and severe injuries to zero. Now that's a pretty big goal that we have, but what it does is help us really get focused on what we need to do to be able to do that. So the city of San Jose did commit to a Vision Zero program a number of years ago. The Vision Zero program is actually focused on 17 corridors that are really where these are big arterials that transport people all the way through the city. Most of the vehicle trips are on these 17 corridors, and unfortunately, most of our crashes and severe injuries and fatalities occur on these as well. That's not the only program that we have, and I'll touch on some other things what we are doing as well on the smaller streets. But this is one that's now really a laser focus for us to actually do something about. City Council approved an action plan last year for us to get going on this, and there's a number of really important things that we're trying to do to actually get this moving in the right direction. Some of these are really engineering and kind of physical improvements, and some are things that we want to do to actually change behavior out there in terms of the motorists, both motorists and those that are non-motorists that use the system. So one of the really main things that we did was at number 2 there, where we formed a Vision Zero task force, and that task force is made up of community members led by and chaired by Councilmember Prowlis and Vice Chair Councilmember Pam Foley. It is really digging into how we can actually improve on safety throughout the city. We do work very closely with the San Jose Police Department on resources to be able to try to slow the speeding down, and there's a number of ways that we work with the police department on that. One of the big things that we're really just getting into in terms of a really big way is community outreach and engagement on how we both will educate motorists on terms of things, be better drivers, as well as people that use the system that are non-motorists. So we have an education campaign, we've had this for a long time, that helps school-age children all the way to seniors be able to more safely use our system. We're going to expand on that in terms of who and what we want to be talking to in terms of that. And then some of the things that are really what we're working on, and Lily and her team are working on, which is really changing some of the physical parameters and physical elements of the roadway system. As you all know, when the city of San Jose was built out over the decades, many parts of our community were really built to really only really accommodate automobiles, really big roads, big turning radius on corners, high speed limits. So what we're actually trying to do is actually retrofit some of these roadways to make them more safe through a program that we do some quick build type things, which is really paint and plastic to get out there to slow the vehicles down. And again, I said that we're prioritizing our resources on these 17 corridors, and I'll get into a little bit on what we're doing on the smaller streets, but Lily, you can go to the next slide. As Shiloh was talking about, that we do have this graph is showing the last 4 or 5 years where and these are fatalities on our roadway system. So if you can see the graph, it is climbing, and that is not the direction we want this graph to go. That last year of the 49 fatalities, that was during COVID. Many more people were at home, so there was less travel. However, what we found out there as we monitor the system, speeds were way up. And I think everybody that is a motorist can probably attest to that, that as fewer people were on the road, more people were speeding and were exhibiting more dangerous behaviors behind the wheel. So our focus is to get that graph going down the other way. Next slide, Lily. So we have the Vision Zero Task Force that's really giving us policy and community guidance on where we want to go. And some of the things that we've been talking about are on this slide, and I don't want to go into all the detail here, but the things we're doing is the City Council did, even with this action plan, provide funding for us to carry it out, which was really great. So they've provided enough funding for us to get started on doing the outreach and have a consultant work. So you're going to start seeing more targeted messaging in social media and actually out on the roads and then in person as well. A lot more information coming on that. Then I did talk about the street redesign, and that's a huge effort for us just because to retrofit the roadways that really need to be fixed in the city the size of San Jose cost, hundreds of millions, but we're going to be trying to do this in key locations for a much cheaper way initially, and then hopefully do these more permanently. We along with our partners, California Walks and Silicon Valley Bike Coalition, are also doing lots and lots of Walk Safe San Jose, and they work with us on the pedestrian safety plans, a new bike plan, and a number of other work that we're trying to do. What has been popping up and mostly I think it was happening during during COVID with some of the roadways that are being not well used. People have been using these for sideshows, and if everybody knows what those are, it's kind of the term that we use for either street racing or donuts, where they will take over an intersection and really have dangerous activities going on. So we are working with the police department on how we are going to deal with that. And our end of it is actually designing locations where we think we can actually make some changes to the roadway intersection itself and hopefully deter some of that activity. A couple of things I'm going to be talking about in a couple of slides. We have some upcoming events we want to talk about, and then some legislative updates. So I'm going to jump to the next slide. So I did mention the Vision Zero Task Force, and it's really an important area that we have been focused on. And you can see who is on the members. We have a really good attendance from key county agencies, county health department, medical examiner, county sheriff's office, city police, and a number of community members that really help us with all of this. As I mentioned before in highlighting, this is going to be one of our main avenues that we're going to be trying to get some communication out to the community. And that includes both motorists and people that are non-motorists that will be able to be using this system more safely. So it's on both of us and us to actually try to get this system to work more safely. Education, engineering, and enforcement are some of the key things that we're going to be working on. So that this is a kind of a tough slide to see, but you'll see more of this coming out there. You'll see it on the roadways, you'll see it in social media, you'll see it in person. A number of things that we're going to be working on to actually get that message out for folks to be able to use the system more safely. Next slide. Some of the things that, and I credit Silicon Valley Bike Coalition and California Walks for helping us get to this, and that is, everybody I hope knows about this Sunday is Viva Calle, which is an open streets event where we close down all the streets and allow it for safe use for anybody walking, biking, skating, etc. We're taking that a little bit further to some of our schools and trying out test program just to actually close some of the streets during the period that there's kids going to school and or being picked up or walking home. So we're calling it Viva Escuela San Jose, and we'll be doing that over the next couple of weeks. We're going to do it at 2 schools, Backrod and then downtown at Horace Mann. So we're going to see how this works, and we're working closely with schools to make this a really great thing. We'll see how this goes. We're hoping to do it in more schools throughout the city. Next slide. So as I talked about, there's the prioritization of these high, unfortunately, this is a difficult acronym, but KSI stands for killed or severely injured. And that's what Shiloh was mentioning earlier. This is really what we're trying to get to. And we have these 17 corridors throughout the city that we're working on, trying to put physical changes into these. City Council has funded about 3 years of this work, and every year we come back and try to get additional funding to work on those. So we do these physical improvements at every one of these locations where we believe that, these are the high priority areas that need to be addressed. And then we'll be adding more as the city council provides more funding for us to work on it. Just an example of some of the things we're doing. As you can see, I talked about paint and plastic, which is things that really deter motorists from driving too fast, because what we do is we put these physical barriers and visual signals out to motorists that they need to go slower around corners. The crosswalks are very, very well designed, and so that they know that this is a place people are walking. We've done a number of these locations and they are working very well. Off to the far right side is an example of a protected bike lane, which is really important because we want more people biking. So what we've done is flip the location of where the parked cars are to put them more towards the street, and then you have a protected bike lane along the curb. So it's much safer for bicyclists to do that. And then something you might be noticing around town, the lower right corner of the traffic signal. We've done a very simple improvement where we put that yellow border around the traffic signal where it makes it much more visible for a motorist to know that there's a traffic signal up there. Believe it or not, some people don't even notice or don't pay attention to or don't see very clearly that traffic signal that needs to be monitoring and controlling vehicles entering intersections. So these are just some of the things we've been working on over this last year. More examples in all parts of town, different things and different treatments that we're doing to actually improve on some of the safety. The thing up the upper right was a speed hump. We're going to be doing probably more of those in neighborhoods, but and as I mentioned also, it's not just these 17 large corridors that we're working on. Lily and her team has an entire team that works on every one of the 10 districts where we address speeding concerns, small scale safety improvements within neighborhoods, traffic calming devices, and that speed hump up at the upper right is an example of that. That team responds to over 1,200 traffic safety concerns a year, so it's 100 a month that we're working on. But we'll get a notice from council office or community that we need to be dealing with either speeding or unsafe traffic. And we are out there working on these things, and we work with the council district and community to come up with these small scale improvements. So that's a whole nother effort outside of the main corridors as well. Next slide, Lily. And I mentioned these sideshows, and you kind of see some of these very large intersections and what's occurring out there. So we are working with San Jose PD on how to deal with these in each one of the council districts. We have not only top 5, but we're now up to 10 different locations that we're going to be doing some modifications to. Our first one went in right now at Tully and Ruby up in District 8, up in near the Evergreen area. And we're going to be doing some additional ones as well. Next slide. So in terms of legislation, and I know that was one of the areas that we're trying to work on, and we've been working on 2 bills over this last year to see if we could get more ability to use either the setting of speed limits or informing motorists that they are exceeding the speed limit. And those 2 are going through. One of them, the one on the top, AB 43, has made it through the legislature. It is awaiting the governor's attention. For some reason, I heard that the governor's been distracted recently, and hopefully he can get to this one. What this does is allow us to set speed limits in these high injury areas to actually lower them beyond what the state law guides what we can do with setting of speed limits. This gives us much more flexibility to actually lower speed limits in these areas. And hopefully the governor will sign that, and we can use that to actually improve on safety in any corridor, or residential, or some of these high volume, high speed corridors. The next one down there, AB 550, didn't make it out of the legislature. It has been tried a couple of times up there. This latest one, we thought we had it all covered, and unfortunately it was pulled by the author right at the end of the session, so we weren't able to get that one through. So why don't I stop there? Pancho and Shiloh, and I understand there may be some questions for us as well.
Shiloh, I know you had some questions that you were gonna help get us kicked off with.
Yeah, thanks, John. So we'll start, and if folks have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But one of the things that we sent out to folks in advance of the meeting was a link to some of the work that is going on in Berkeley around reimagining public safety as it relates to traffic enforcement. I'm wondering if you can just talk about some of the other initiatives and ideas that you're hearing come out of other cities, and whether any of them sound intriguing to you and that we could adopt them here.
I don't really know much about what other cities are doing. As I mentioned earlier, mayor and council have given us a very, very high priority for traffic safety for our system. So we've been laser focused on that. So I don't really have a lot of information as what other cities are doing for changed enforcement practices, but I've heard that there are, but I'm sorry, I really don't know much about that. But as you can see, so what we're trying to work on is all aspects of this through our Vision Zero program, both from education, the engineering piece. I showed a lot of pictures, and then also working with the police department on how we can enforce or lower speeds. A lot of that can be, we can do a lot better if we have that state legislation changed. Hopefully we'll get one of those and maybe the next one next year. So we'll be having a better ability to actually control our own system better than we have before. And we wouldn't need enforcement. That's, I think, where we're trying to go to, is that the better we can do of controlling speeds through physical changes and education, the better way that we can go about trying to make the system safer. We have a long ways to go. As you can see, those photos were only some of the areas of the town that we're trying to deal with. This is a huge city we have 2,500 miles of streets, both small and large streets, that we've got to deal with. And I think if I had those tools and funding, we would be able to make some really big changes. So I think that's what we're focused on, is doing those things.
So kind of related to that, and I touched on this when I was making some comments at the beginning, but given that traffic enforcement is the leading cause of PD interactions that relate to use of force incidents, I'm wondering if you can talk about, your own kind of personal interest in really diving into that and using your power to figure out what are those initiatives in other cities, what are they doing, how can we reduce police interactions in the context of traffic enforcement, given that that is the leading cause of use of force.
Sure, and I think it certainly is a nationwide effort to do this, and I'm sure that Chief Mata is going to be addressing this as well. And I think where we're going to look into this is potentially at our Vision Zero task force. There is certainly community input and leadership on that from a number of areas that could possibly be one of those areas that we can look into. In terms of what we're doing, I think the way we work with the police department is very, very cooperatively and working on when we are hearing about unsafe conditions out in areas, whether it be local residential streets around schools or main corridors. We work with the police department very closely to determine how we can actually slow people down that would then not need enforcement. So that's our focus, is actually working on those things, whether it be speed signs, physical changes to the roadway, or other efforts or techniques that we want to put out there on the roadway system. So we're going to be working on that really hard, and we have been doing that. The council has given us high priority and now funding us to actually do those things. So we're going to be working really hard on those kind of activities to actually slow people down that wouldn't require any enforcement.
Yeah, you and Poncho, I know there's some comments and questions in the chat. So I have two more questions and then maybe I'll turn it over to you to sort through those and surface those.
Great, thanks.
John, you mentioned a few years ago that it was a few years ago that DOT first worked with Assemblymember Chu to advance some ASC legislation, automated speed safety enforcement legislation for a pilot in San Francisco and San Jose. And then you mentioned that he ran that bill again this past year. It didn't go anywhere. The first year it was stopped by the state police. And then this year, there were a lot of concerns over privacy and equity issues. So I know that's of interest to folks on this call, the privacy and equity piece of that. And I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit more in detail about like what specifically does that look like? I know that this issue was brought to the Transportation Equity Task Force to get some feedback on it. Like what are the issues, and specifically, you know, how does the city of San Jose plan to address those issues going forward in that kind of legislation?
Yeah, so what Shiloh's talking about is this year's bill was called AB 550. I do not remember what last year or the previous year's was, but we've tried this a couple times now. The first time it was a pilot just for San Francisco and San Jose, and both chiefs of police and councils and mayors of both cities really supported that. It didn't make it through due to what you were referencing. There was some opposition at a state level on that. So Assemblymember Chu put it back again this last year, and that is AB 550. And we worked really closely with, and this was now a number of other cities that were wanting to be in on this. So it had much more support north and south in terms of cities and community activists that wanted to have this so that we could slow down vehicles and make the roads safer. One of those areas that required a lot of work was exactly what you're talking about, how to handle an equity issue of, you know, another ticket, another burden on somebody that may not be able to you know, really be able to handle a ticket like that. So there were provisions that we put into the bill that it was pretty minimal, and I can't remember the exact, but I think it was about $50 a ticket, with provisions that would allow it to be waived for people of lower means. We thought we worked it all the way through equity interest, and thought that the bill was in pretty good shape from a number of different places, and then the author decided to pull it. So I don't know why that it was originally, or why it was ultimately pulled like that and not move forward, but did a lot of work through state organizations. And again, there was a lot more cities than just San Francisco and San Jose that were interested in this. And so it took a lot of work to get it through legislation and the authors and trying to make that happen. I do believe that Assemblymember Chu may want to try it again, but again, it would probably need to be modified again to make sure it really accomplishes the safety factors that we want to do, which many areas of the city are clamoring for us to actually do better with. And I mentioned earlier that we address 1,200 complaints a year from citizens throughout the city in terms of high speeding and unsafe traffic motorist practices. This bill would have helped us do that. It is a deterrent. It hopefully would do that. It will not solve everything, but it's one of those tools that we really would like to revisit again, as long as it can be made that it does the right thing, but not, you know, not some of the wrong things. So hopefully we can bring it back.
Right. I have one last question, and I think maybe some other folks might want to probe a little more on that particular piece of the conversation. And again, getting back to from our perspective, the traffic enforcement piece of this being that that's a leading cause of use of force, and you know, looking at ways that we can just simply reduce the number of police interactions by designing our streets differently. And just slowing people down based on just narrower lanes, making sure people can't just speed around a corner. And then we don't need a police officer on every corner ticketing folks. So we viewed this as, we've viewed traffic enforcement as perhaps, or the role that DOT plays as perhaps kind of a lower hanging fruit way of testing out these different ideas of just simply reducing the number of police on our streets doing traffic enforcement. A piece of that is, so for street closures and festivals like Viva Calle, which is this Sunday, I'm wondering, and I know Andrea from PRNS is on the call too, but police are required to be there. Anytime there's a street closure, if there's a festival, there are requirements around you have to have this many. And I'm wondering if you can just talk about, because that's another place where we could potentially be just reducing the number of police that are physically present or need to be involved or feel like they need to be involved in street
Right.
closures.
Yeah,
So
it's a good question.
What's your role in that? What is the policy? What is the practice? Like, why is it that way?
Yeah, good question. And again, I hope everybody can make it out to Viva Calle this weekend because it's a wonderful event. Lots and lots of people out there, which does require us to actually close the streets. So my end, our department actually provides support in a number of different areas there. We have coordinators that work in Lily Limsau's division, again, that work on every event in the city to make sure that we've got traffic safety as a top priority whenever we close a street or don't close the street, and there just happens to be an event somewhere. So we work on that everywhere with any proposer of an event, whether it be the city or private sector people that are proposing street events in any type, shape, or form. Then we also have people in our parking compliance unit that work on this as well. So our parking compliance officers aren't out there writing tickets, they're there to help with traffic flow. So they will be out there assisting either police department or the event organizers in some of the efforts there. We also issue the tow away signs that we try to close the streets. If we're going to want to get the cars off the streets, we issue those signs so that folks don't park in a particular event area. And then we also, from our maintenance division, we're the ones that bring out the barriers that we'll use for many events that will actually close the street off. So we are functioning in a whole bunch of different areas. We don't set the numbers of police department that would be at an event. And perhaps in this particular one, if we're talking about like Viva Calle, the Parks Department is done a terrific job with organizing that event. They would be able to maybe speak to how many police officers that they believe they might need on that. And I think they could probably get a better idea of that. But we work with the police department on all of these different types of events to determine what they need from us as a department in terms of traffic control, the barriers, physical barriers themselves, coordination with all the other elements of street closure like that.
I guess a question related would be, do you have to be relying on police as much for those kinds of things, or can DOT simply say, you know what, streets are our purview, and I, as the head of DOT, I'm tasked with being the person who figures out how we're going to do that. I think probably people on this call would say, why do we need armed police officers being involved in a street closure for like an art and wine festival or something?
Sure. Yeah, and it costs money too. So I think it's a fair question to ask, and it actually has been asked by a lot of event organizers of what's the right numbers of sworn police officers that needed in an event like this. And I know that PD has a number of great community service officers that they use for this as well. They would also augment whatever is needed or maybe replace sworn officers. And then our parking compliance. So we have a lot of resources that we put into closures like this that are not police department or police armed officers. Maybe that's something that this group could actually look at to see what's the right level. And I think it really depends on what the type of festival it is too. I think I wouldn't be the best one to describe what is needed in terms of security or police presence on that. But certainly when we're closing streets like this, we're key into what makes that safe in terms of traffic safety if we're going to have people in the street that used to have cars on it. We want to make sure those cars stay off of it until we're ready to reopen it again. So that's our focus, is making sure we don't have automobiles somehow making their way into a closed event, that we have pedestrians in the middle of the street.
Great. Poncho, I'll pass it over to you. And thanks, John.
So again, thank you, Shiloh, and John for this conversation. I think one of the things that we're obviously, I think there's a very big concern over how quickly and what are the obstacles to be able to get to situations where law enforcement does not need to be involved in these situations. And obviously there's some state legislation and some other things, because like Shiloh shared some of the data about the use of force. Appreciate you being able to share a little bit about the background of this. Are there any other things that we should be looking at as being obstacles to be able to come up with a radically different solution or way of thinking about this? Because it seems like what we're doing right now, we're not making our communities safer. And even the policies and things that you've been starting with Vision Zero are not happening quickly enough. And like what other things should be aware of, because subcommittees are going to be working on developing proposals or solutions for a very different approach to things. What else should be aware of from the system perspective that have been obstacles to this? Because I hear you saying we've been looking at it, we've been trying it, but we haven't made a lot of progress thus far.
Well, yeah. So I think I remember that slide that showed fatalities and severe injury. Well, it actually didn't have the severe injuries on there, but Shiloh mentioned it coming in. That we are focused on trying to make the system safer from a physical and an education and an engineering standpoint. And the size of the city is probably the biggest barrier, and the historical way we actually designed and built many of our streets. So for us, it's the really tough thing is actually getting out there and retrofitting the street. And we've got a lot of people that don't want to have us do that because they're more interested in being able to get to where they want to go with their vehicle at the fastest way that they can do that. So it's not easy. We're doing this as best we can. I think if we had some more tools and support from groups like this, that would be great if we could be able to really retrofit in a faster way and support funding from council grants and others. That's what we're trying to do. And Shiloh again said it really well. The more that we can actually physically or educationally wise or engineering wise be able to modify people's behavior on the street to make it safer, the better we are with that. So then we don't need to have the other end of this, which might be the enforcement side. We are focused on this like you wouldn't believe. We've created new groups and new engineering groups in our department just to put this in place as fast as we can. So that's what we're on to, is trying to do that. So we'd be more than happy to engage this group again with some of those things that we're doing and see if we're doing it right, especially that legislation that we're coming back. Hopefully it comes back. But I think it would be really great to actually have a longer conversation about what would make some sense. Just to know that piece of legislation was about controlling excessive speeds on our streets, which is the highest cause of our crashes and fatalities and severe injuries. It is people going above the speed limit and us not having any way to really control that once they're doing that. So it was really an intent to really get safety into these neighborhoods on our main corridors, and it's speeding that's really a main cause of that. And this was only one way to do it. We've got many others that we'd like to try on a physical basis, but that was an important element of it.
Thanks, John.
Hi,
Rob?
Yeah, sorry to I don't know if this comes across as a little bit inappropriate, so I apologize in advance. Hello, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Rob Ansari. I am a member of this committee representing San Jose residents who are battling mental illness and substance use. And thank you, first of all, for everyone who prepared for today's meeting and the presentation. Thank you for your time. What my concern is that this committee is, I feel like the committee members should be deciding on what goes on for a meeting. It's this committee has been in place for enough time for there to have been a steering committee and a subcommittee that decides what is going on for the meeting. I don't mean to say that what's been spoken today is not relevant, but I'm not sure if I speak for the rest of the committee, but I feel like as though the discussion is not exactly being steered by the members and by the communities we're intended to represent. I think there was a few comments of that in the chat as well, talking about how the intent of this is to have community members who have experienced police violence to be speaking. And I really feel as though moving forward, it should be the committee members who decide on what is going to be spoken on during these meetings and what the agenda is going to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Ansari. Just to give a little folks a little update about some next steps with this, and again, thank you for the conversation so far this morning. We are, as of last week, we were able to get our final appointees to the committee. So we have a full committee now because neighborhood commissioners were appointed. So we're happy that we have a full committee. With that, I think there's some outreach that's gone out to members of the committee around joining subcommittees, where we'll be able to get into deeper dialogue around different policy ideas, and then members of those subcommittees will help select a steering committee to actually help design the agenda. So we haven't had a full committee yet. We hope to get started with the subcommittees very shortly, and then help design the following meetings. So because we have a very large group and there's a lot of information for us to be able to share, we need to jump into those committees where some real work can actually happen and real conversations happen. So Sparky.
Hi there. That's a good place for me to give a plug on my committee, Alternatives to Policing. I need members to step up. The idea is we'll sit and chat and talk about all the alternatives that do not include police for public safety. So if you're looking at a committee to join to have a discussion on what we might put forward and look at models from other places, this is the place to be. So join my committee when we set up a time. I know I'm trying to meet with Pancho and my other co-facilitator, but I think I only had 2 people signed up so far. So I'm putting a plug in for my committee.
Sparky, you could count me in.
You know me. Great.
I also wanted to take this time to speak to the committee about some of the work I've been doing, and I think is relevant to what we were speaking on today, but I think it's an important kind of piece of groundwork that would be useful. So over the past month, I've been developing a survey or a survey instrument to better understand how people from different backgrounds perceive interactions with the police. So not what the data on quality improvement from SJPD or the city tells us from the police's side, but what do actual people interacting with the police, what is their experience? And so this has been developed with help from different community partners who primarily work with communities who are marginalized, understaffed, underserved, or communities that represent, people with mental illness or substance use. And so this survey measure will be ready within the next week. But I am hoping to kind of bring all of you committee members who represent various communities to kind of help spread this survey, because the intent is to better understand how different people perceive police interactions. And I feel like that's an important groundwork to lay to then start moving into alternatives. And so I'm looking forward to sharing this survey with all of you over the next week or two, but it's just something for you to keep in mind and to think of, maybe think of people who in your community or people in your homes who might have experienced police interactions, who might have stories that and that they might like to share. And so just something you might want to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I'll just say a quick note. So yeah, we will be starting our committees. We did reach out to a few people to help get the process started. And so I know that Darcy sent out an email and Tamara did um, from, and I'm not facilitating subcommittees, Sparky. Thank you. um, what I'm doing is my role is to try to support the work of the subcommittee so that they can self-facilitate. And so I did reach out to, like I said, Tamara sent out an email yesterday, and Darcy sent one out to the people who signed up via the Google form. I'm working with Jamal and Mika to send out one in regards to police accountability. Hopefully that will go out tonight. The hope is that when people fill out the doodle, which will give some times for us to meet, that we'll have that meeting set within the next week and a half, so that we can get the process started. On the first meeting agenda is the selection of the people who will serve on the steering committee from the subcommittee. Yeah, and I think
So
that
Chris,
yes,
when I said you're facilitating, I didn't mean you were running the meetings. I meant you were doing exactly what you're talking about. You're sort of trying to help us organize. And I think if I can step in, because I saw a comment about who chose what committees. I mean, my feeling is once we get into these committees, we'll decide who is the chairs who are running them or whatever. Right now, I think we were just drafted to sort of help start the meetings. So I would say that once we get in these committees, then we'll decide what our agendas are and who's going to be running them. So anyway,
Yeah,
sorry,
that's what I was about to say. I think from what I'm reading with the comments is there's people aren't understanding how it felt like Sparky was in charge of the committee, and what I got from talking to Chris was that somebody has to coordinate the meeting of the committee and then decide once the people who signed up, everybody I assume got the Google form. Hopefully everybody filled it out. And once we get in the meeting, then we decide who does what, right, as a group. So I think that probably needs to be communicated to everybody so that people understand how that process is working.
I have a question. So if somebody put that they were interested in being part of 2 different committees, are they only allowed to be part of one, or can they be part of 2 different committees?
I think they can be part of 2 different committees. The only thing that we have to be aware of from a Brown Act perspective is that we can't have a majority of the voting members of the overarching committee serving on any one committee. So we're actually the Police Accountability and Reform Committee that has been proposed is kind of close to half the voting members. So we have to be aware of that. So that's the only thing. We just can't have a committee that's meeting and making deliberations as part of this per a conversation with the city manager's office. That's the direction they gave us. So beyond that, or you would be like, people can serve on more than one committee, but it will be a fair amount of work where we're getting into real dialogue and really talking about the changes that need to happen in the city.
Can you, Poncho, can you guys like assure that the people who are on this committee who are impacted are on the committees that are most important, like, the ones that are really going to make effect, that those voices are on those really significant committees, and not put, the ones that are willing to, like, oh, the police are all nice and isn't because they're getting money. I'm sorry, but, we're trying to fix this so this way we're not having people dead in our streets. We're not having children growing up fatherless. We're trying to make our streets safe, and the police need to understand it's not about we hate them. It's their behavior is disgusting, and we need to end it now because too many lives have been lost already, and a lot of money, resources, and lawsuits have been lost as a result of it, but nobody wants to talk about that. So it's very important that the people who are on these committees, where they're you know, like really going to make significant change and have a say, that we make sure we have the right people in there and not the ones that are going to be easily swayed, please.
Thank you, Lori. That's a really important point. Well, we have to make sure that we have that real voice on every one of these committees, because they're all really important, but each of them, we need to make sure that that voice is really representative. So Dr. Armelin.
Hey, yeah, I just wanted to speak really quickly to the survey idea, which I think is a good one. Tarab, I was going to offer, and just to remind everyone, we already have the People's Budget Survey that's being solicited now. We have well over 1,000 respondents, but we would like to have many more. I can put the link to that again in the chat here in a moment, but I want to just remind folks that we do actually already have this survey instrument that's running. Although, as a scholar, we don't ever turn down more information, right? So Tarab, if you wanted to work on that, we'd be happy to sort of communicate on that as well. It'd be really cool if between the two surveys, maybe even be able to put that information together, because then more powerful sort of information can come forward for the group. But our policy is more information is great. So if you wanted to reach out, or I'll reach out to you privately as well, we're happy to help with that or help put some of that stuff together.
Thank you. I'll reach out to you privately to work on that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Armelin. I'm going to move us on to the next item on the agenda, which is we're talking about civilian public safety oversight models. There was a conversation that happened at the Charter Review Commission, and I want to share a letter that was sent to the Charter Review Commission to the chair of the Charter Review Commission by the city manager. I'm dropping this into the chat right now. And it basically clarified a number of different initiatives that are happening around police reform, and made it a recommendation that the Charter Review Commission should not proceed with discussing matters around policing, that should be the exclusive purview of this group, of the Reimagining Public Safety Community Advisory Committee. There's a concern because they have been working and coordinating, and I've let folks know about some meetings that they had, because the city charter itself is actually the place where, if there were going to be a ongoing entity like civilian oversight, it would need to go to the voters as part of a charter change, as one of the models that could happen to make some change happen as a structure. And the Charter Review Commission is a body that looks at structures for the city. So there were I think there were some folks from that started to get together to talk about whether or not that was appropriate for the city manager to actually make that point and to stop the Charter Review Commission from responding. A number of organizations met to say the city manager really shouldn't have been speaking for us, because she didn't speak to us or ask and try to clarify that. And so there was a coalition letter that was generated last weekend, because this was going to be coming before the Charter Review Commission this past Monday. So this was I dropped into the chat a coalition letter about that. I just wanted to offer another invitation. I think let folks know about the Charter Review Commission had a meeting on the 23rd of August to really explore and talk about different public safety oversight models that exist in other cities. That's a really great informative session. If people would like to see that, we can share that again in the chat, or share that in an email follow-up around what came out of that particular session. And then secondarily, I think they're planning additional meetings. In fact, they're going to do some additional planning today for follow-up and conversations around that. So just to clarify what happened at the Charter Review Commission this Monday was that there were a number of community voices that spoke out and said, told the city manager basically said the city manager butting in and trying to speak on our behalf and say that here's what's acceptable or who can talk in what ways. about what topics was inappropriate, and that the work of the Charter Review Commission to look at structures for police accountability and reform was acceptable, and that there would be members of our committee that could work with, and this police accountability subcommittee, once that gets going, would be happy to be able to work with the Charter Review Commission on that. So just wanted to share that. That's some activity that happened this past week. Jamal?
I just wanted to see if we could go back to address the comments that Kiana and Jesselyn put in the chat about the transparency and like selection of speakers, and have a brief conversation, because I don't want to let that stuff disappear when people leave the meeting disenfranchised with this process, and it derail the work that we can move forward. I feel like we do need to spend some time addressing that so that we can move forward in a productive way. So I don't know.
Is there some proposal that you would have? Because we're fine being able to, I'm fine being able to have that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if
What do you
Jesselyn and
suggest?
Kiana, I don't know if they want to, I don't want to speak for them, but I want to make sure that the opportunity to share is out there so that we can talk about the specifics there. Would y'all like to speak up so we can get this addressed, Kiana and or Jesselyn? I see Sandra's hand. Maybe Sandra, somebody.
Sandra, you can go ahead. I don't have my thoughts together, but if you want to speak, that would be great.
Oh, yeah. So I actually had a different question. So if someone else would like to speak to this, but I have a follow-up question, which is, I think that at this point, it would be really helpful for all of us to have a roster of who is on the committee and their organizations and constituencies they're representing. I think that would be really helpful for us in working together.
We can certainly send that out. We can certainly send that later today.
You probably should go ahead, Jesselyn.
Jesselyn, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think it would be great to have some transparency around the leadership of this committee, how that leadership has been chosen, how these speakers and agendas are being set up and by whom they're being set up. If you could answer some of those questions. You know, when Kiana and I spoke with Poncho about joining this committee originally, we were definitely under the impression that this would be a much more collaborative process that would be about community input and listening to those who are most impacted by police violence, rather than listening to someone, you know, from the Department of Transportation talk for a half an hour about a lot of initiatives that A, have already been funded by the city, and B, seem to be also targeting Black and Brown communities for surveillance. So I'm not sure if you can answer, if anyone, Poncho or anyone else can answer some of those questions.
So Jesselyn, thank you for the question. I think I just wanted to just be clear with everyone. I'm just trying to serve at least for the time being until we have a steering committee, subcommittees working like as a little bit of a caretaker to try to make sure that we're able to get some of the conversations going. At the first meeting, I mentioned that there would be a structure of these meetings where we'd actually try to start with some of these dialogues and then being able to share some information, and then subcommittees where we'd be able to dive in much more into the meat of conversation dialogue, especially if it's hard to be able to do so with a group as large as this one to be able to make that happen. But very happy to be able to make sure that these dialogues are able to kind of, and the structure of these committees and the agendas of these committees are able to be decided by a steering committee. We hope to have that steering committee working very shortly once the subcommittees are able to move forward. The challenge with getting subcommittees moving forward have been the fact that we haven't had a full committee yet until the Neighborhoods Commission appointed their representatives last week. And now we're in a position to organize subcommittees and make sure that everyone is able to participate fully. in the future, I'd like to very much see the steering committee making those decisions. So, so as part of the survey that people were sent, there was a question if you'd like to be part of helping to organize the agendas, and we will get that committee moving as soon as we can.
Right. And for me, it's like we've had so many meetings and nothing has been established. So it seems like our focus is lost, or that we are not on the right track anymore because nothing has really happened as far as like a group structure and things like that. And yeah, I just want to acknowledge that this conversation is uncomfortable, but the police are still killing people, and that is uncomfortable, and that should be at the forefront of all of these conversations. Just this past weekend, it had been 100 days since SJPD killed Demetrius Stanley. I've talked with the family, I've been to his funeral. That is really uncomfortable, and it needs to be addressed, and we need to prevent another instance like that from happening. Just yesterday in San Francisco, they harassed a 12-year-old boy. This SJPD harassed a 12-year-old Black boy in San Francisco. Police violence is not going away. This group has an opportunity to make some change, a very slim window of opportunity. This group has only, like 6 months of operation as it currently stands, and we've wasted 2 months kind of doing nothing. So I think you can understand why I'm a little frustrated with that. Yeah.
Thank you. Sandra?
Yeah, I can understand the thought process behind wanting to set up the committees, and then from the committees setting up the steering committee. But I'm wondering, given Kiana's point that it's been 2 months and we have a very short window with which to work, what everyone thinks about perhaps sending out the roster, and at our next meeting electing a steering committee.
That sounds great. Like, I would love for us to make that happen. I would have wanted to wait for that to happen until we had a full committee anyway, which again, like I said, we have the final appointees from the Neighborhoods Commission, but I'm glad that, but I think it makes perfect sense for us to do so now. Any other comments? Go ahead, Jamal.
Yeah, I'm typically a very methodical kind of process-oriented guy, and recognize that, bringing all of us together, we're like an expansion sports team, right? We're gonna have some struggles in the beginning until we get a flow. But I do agree with the comments that that we can be a little bit more deliberate, and how we put the team together. We can take a moment to rethink the process and start with everybody here. So I agree with picking a committee at the next meeting. Everybody may or may not be participatory on all the committees, so that may not be the best way. We can just go with those here, and then that committee can start to help guide the rest of the direction and actions, so that people feel productive and no one feels like this is a waste of time. So I'm in full support of that.
Thank you, Jamal. Any other comments on any follow-up steps, or any follow-up that needs to happen around the civilian public safety oversight models?
Well, I think it would be really interesting for us to have a conversation around those different oversight models and make a recommendation to the charter committee.
Thank you, Sandra. No, I think do you think it would be a useful thing for us to have at the committee as a whole, dive into it, or to let the police reform and accountability subcommittee start working on it first, and then they can make a presentation to our group?
Good question. Sorry, this is Sandra again. Yeah, probably for the committee to review it and then make a presentation on it if we have the time to do so. I know there are some timelines with the Charter Commission making its recommendations. And I don't know, given where we're at in our process, if we have the time to do it that way.
Thank you. All right. With that, I wanted to open up the floor for public comments. So if you'd like to if you're a member of the public and you'd like to be able to speak, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. And if members of the committee need to, we will have this open. This will be recorded. We'll make sure that will stay on until we receive all the public comment. So go ahead and raise your hands. Jamal, your hand is still raised, or did you want to make a comment?
No, I didn't have nothing. My bad.
Okay, cool.
Hey, Pancho, I'm wondering, as far as the agenda setting, if it would be helpful, so just so the folks on this call know, since this is under the purview of, I think it's called the Sunshine Act, there needs to be like an 8-day notice of what's on the agenda. And so immediately my gut says, hey, we should get a group of people just to kind of be in an ad hoc kind of steering committee for the next agenda until we do set that actual steering committee. But since the agenda is due to the city by Monday, that's like a short turnaround, right? To get, a group of people together. But I'm wondering if there might be, it sounds like the agenda for next meeting is going to be pretty straightforward as far as electing a steering committee and you're talking some next steps. But are there a group of people, if there are a group of people who would like to see the agenda before it's submitted and maybe add some, their thoughts or their comments, you can send me an email. I'll put it in the chat and we'll try to wrap our heads around what that will look like, again, before we have to submit it, so it can be posted on the city's website by Monday. Again, this is just an effort to try to be transparent and be, and have as much co-ownership of the process within, these rules. So yeah, so I see your question, Kiana. The obstacle that I'm looking at is that we have to turn in by Monday. Because of we have to make a public notice of what the agenda is. Ideally, we will get together, right? And we will set the agenda together. But I don't know if it's too much to expect that we can coordinate a lot of calendars tomorrow or Friday. But that was just my thought. To try to include as many people in the process as possible. May not be helpful, but I was just trying to be helpful to the process.
Thanks, Chris. Great idea. Paul?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I just want to let the people know when they went into the conversation and stated what they stated, that was like really healthy to do, because this is our community. And especially the people that have been most impacted by it, they should have the privilege of doing that, of just stepping in and saying, hey, you know what, this is going a little bit off track, and I don't really appreciate it. And the way that the dude stated it was perfect. One of the things that I would like to bring to this committee is that I would like to see particular items, like, say, for instance, an officer that fires on somebody or is involved in a great bodily injury, that he has to be tested, that he's bottled. Okay, I'm just bringing that up as a suggestion. Now, that be given to the council to decide on its own merits, because what I'm fearing is that we're going to give them this big old list of recommendations, and in that they're going to be able to water it down and whittle it down, rather than deciding on particular issues on their own merits. So if we give them 20 recommendations, they'll just knock it down to 3 and say, okay, we gave it to them, rather than deciding on each one of those so that we can hear their conversation, so we can determine what, like test the temperature of the water there at the council. And so that's just a suggestion that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Sandra?
Hi, yeah, so just a request. It sounds like a number of us committee members who are not intimately familiar with the legalities of how a Brown Act or a Sunshine Act meeting need to be run. If those guidelines could be sent out to all the committee members so that we are all aware of our responsibilities and the structure and limitations of how we need to run these meetings in this group would be appreciated.
Great. I'll request some training materials from the city manager's office. So, and I'll make sure that gets sent out along with the roster. Hopefully we'll get some of that as soon as possible. Tarab?
I just wanted to follow up on the request for data sets that was put in last meeting. Was there any update on that or any follow-up that's been done?
Yeah, thank you, Tarab. I think what we're going to do is divide information up and send it to the committees in our drive, in our resource drive that we have set up. There is a link, so I'll put the link to that drive here in the chat to everyone. But specifically some information about some readily available information about calls for service was here. Here's a link to a Google Doc that we got from the city for a couple of things. So this is very preliminary, but thanks for that.
Thank you. And just to follow up on that, the reason I asked was because during the presentation today, the graph on traffic stops, I noticed that the number 3, spot for use of force was wellness checks. So traffic stops were where force was used the most, but number 3 was wellness checks. And wellness checks supposed to be for the wellness of the person. So it's kind of, ironic that that's a case where force is being used third most. And this is one of the reasons I specifically requested for data on outcomes from wellness checks and data from use of force on wellness checks, outcomes where the person is linked. And I think that presentation only highlights the importance for that data set. So I'm really looking forward to seeing it if the city can hopefully provide that.
Thank you. Jamal?
Yeah, last thing on my end. So I recognize that you're in a tough spot, Pancho, and I wasn't jumping up at the bit to try to run this group because this is a lot. So I think, well, if we can just err on the side of, I think Sandra brought up some really good points about the roster, about sharing all the processes and starting anew from today. I don't see a point why we can't move forward and be really productive. So that just let me know how I can help with that, and we can kind of shift things so that everybody really truly feels like their voice is heard in this process.
Thanks, Jamal. Appreciate it. Any other members of the public? All right, seeing none. And the follow-up items that we've talked about, again, I dropped in the chat a little bit of follow-up items, but for us, if there are additional, please respond to the surveys. I know that there have been, doodle surveys that have gone out to try to see if we could schedule subcommittees, and we would like to get those moving forward. Like Chris has put a request in if people would like to be part of agenda setting, like for us to be able to start getting some people together to kind of talk about the following meetings. We'll get a roster out to folks on the committee, hopefully today. And so I think that's what we're looking forward to, next steps, and we should send something out as soon as possible. All right. Thank you, folks. With that, this meeting is adjourned at 9:36 a.m.